Before I share the story, I want to speak to anyone who feels like they've been taken for granted, or worse, become invisible to the people they love most. It's a painful, lonely place to be. It can make you feel like you've lost the person you used to be. My story is about what happened when I was pushed to that point, but it's also about the hard journey of finding my own strength again. It's a journey of quite literally coming back to myself. That's actually the title of a book I found incredibly helpful. Coming Back to Myself, 60 Liberating Truths to Find Yourself Again. If you're feeling a bit lost and need a guide to help you find you again, I can't recommend it enough. Now, what's coming next will show you how reclaiming your power can change everything. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It was a Saturday afternoon when I first truly felt it, an ominous quiet from my son Randy and his wife, Irene. It wasn't a big dramatic fight, nothing you could point a finger at. It was a shift, a silent declaration that my place in their lives, the one I had held for decades, had changed. My name is Candace Young, and I'm 68 years old. I live in Boulder, Colorado, in the same house my late husband Jim and I bought 30 years ago. Back then, Boulder was a sleepy college town. Now it's all tech booms and new buildings, vibrant and busy. Since Jim passed last year, though, the house has felt too quiet. The vibrancy of the city outside just makes the silence inside seem deeper. That Saturday, the quiet felt particularly heavy. Christmas was just a few weeks away, and I was trying to pin down our plans. In my mind, it was settled. Everyone would come here to my house in Boulder, just as we'd always done when the kids were younger. I'd spent the morning looking up recipes, thinking about the menu. I picked up my phone, my fingers tapping out a message to the group chat with Randy and Irene. Hi, you two. Just starting to plan the Christmas dinner menu. Thinking of making that prime rib you love, Randy, and Irene, your favorite scallop potatoes. Let me know what time you think you'll be here on Christmas Eve. I hit send, a little bubble of warmth and anticipation in my chest. I imagine the reply. Sounds amazing, Mom. Can't wait. I busied myself around the house, tidying up things that were already tidy. I watered Jim's old ficus tree. I checked my phone. Nothing. An hour passed. I made a cup of tea. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. That's when the first little prickle of anxiety started. I knew they were busy. Randy, he's in his late 40s now, so wrapped up in his career, always meetings and deadlines. And Irene, well, she's always been very independent. I knew she spent a lot of time with her own mother. I tried to be understanding. I really did. I'd always tell myself it was just life changes. This is what happens when children grow up and build their own lives. But deep down, I knew something was off. It had been for a while. Ever since Jim died, the distance had stretched. He had been the bridge, the one who called Randy every Sunday to talk about football, the one who made Irene laugh with his terrible jokes. Without him, I felt like I was standing on one side of a canyon, waving, and they were just getting smaller and smaller on the other side. The afternoon light was starting to fade when my phone finally buzzed. I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped it. But the message wasn't the one I'd been hoping for. It was from Irene, not the group chat. Just to me. Sounds lovely, Candace. We're still figuring out our holiday plans. Things are just really hectic right now. We'll let you know. I read it twice. Candace, not Mom. She hadn't called me Mom in a long time, but seeing it in print like that, it stung. Hectic. We'll let you know. It was a polite, professional brush-off. The kind you'd give to a distant acquaintance, not your family. I sat down in Jim's old recliner, the phone heavy in my hand. I thought about Christmases past, back when we had the little cabin in Aspen. The snow would be piled high, and the kids would come running in, their faces red from the cold, and the whole house would smell like pine and roasting turkey. I could almost hear the laughter, feel the warmth, that sense of belonging. That feeling felt a million miles away right now. I felt a pit forming in my stomach, a cold dread. What if they didn't come? What if I was planning a dinner for an empty table? I shook my head, pushing the thought away. No, I wouldn't let that happen. I was being silly, overreacting to a simple text. They were just busy. That's all. I would win them back. This Christmas, I would make everything so perfect, so full of love that they couldn't possibly stay away. I'd make the homemade turkey, the cranberry sauce from scratch, and especially the mashed potatoes Randy had always loved. I'd decorate the house by Randy's favorite wine, and I would pull them back to me. I would fix this. That's what a mother does, right? We hold the family together. We make the effort, even when it feels like we're the only ones trying. I stood up and went to the kitchen to start my shopping list. I wouldn't let this one vague message ruin my hope. They were my family, and they would be here for Christmas. I threw myself into those preparations like it was my job. For the next few weeks, my kitchen in Boulder was my sanctuary. I wasn't just cooking. I was trying to rebuild a bridge, one dish at a time. I made the cranberry sauce from scratch, the kind that simmers for hours and fills the whole house with the scent of oranges and spice. I bought the most expensive cut of beef, and I spent an entire afternoon just perfecting the mashed potatoes, the way Randy always loved them, creamy, rich, with a ridiculous amount of butter. As I stirred and chopped, my mind kept drifting back to those holidays in our little mountain cabin in Aspen. I'd see Randy and Irene, younger then, stamping snow off their boots, their laughter echoing in the small, warm space. The kids would always rush in, their cheeks bright red, and everything just felt right. Those dinners, the laughter, the feeling of just belonging to each other. It was a constant in my life, something I thought would never, ever change. I chalked up the growing distance to life, just getting in the way. Randy's career was demanding. Irene was close to her own mother. These were normal things. But standing there in my kitchen, mashing those potatoes, I had to admit, deep down, I knew something was off. Christmas Day finally arrived. I was up before the sun, my heart a nervous mix of hope and anxiety. I put the turkey in the oven. I set the dining table with the good china, the one Jim and I only used for special occasions. I placed the wine Randy liked on the counter to breathe. By noon, everything was perfect. The house was decorated, the food was ready, and the table was set for 3. And then I waited. The house was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I sat in the living room, smoothing the wrinkles on my dress, glancing at my phone on the coffee table. No messages. Noon came and went. The food was resting on the counter, staying warm. 1 o'clock. My hopes started to feel a little thin. I told myself, they're just running late. Traffic on Christmas Day is always unpredictable. At 2 o'clock, the sting of their silence was becoming a physical ache. I picked up my phone, my hands shaking just slightly. I sent a simple text to the group chat. Hey, just checking in. Dinner is ready whenever you are. Are you close? I stared at the screen. The message showed delivered, not read. A pit began to form in my stomach, a cold, heavy dread that all the hot food in the kitchen couldn't warm up. I walked back to the dining room and just looked at the table, the empty chairs, the plates waiting for people who weren't here. I tried to stay calm. I tried to find a reason. Maybe their car broke down. Maybe someone was sick. But a nagging, horrible feeling told me this Christmas was not going to be like the others. This was something different. This silence was an answer all by itself. I sat on the sofa, my phone in my lap, just watching the clock. 2:30 p.m., 2:45 p.m. Every tick felt like a hammer blow. I felt foolish. I felt all that effort, all that love I'd poured into the food, just sitting in the kitchen, growing cold. And I was still waiting. At exactly 3 p.m., my phone buzzed on the coffee table. That little sound. It was such a relief, I almost laughed. See, I whispered to myself. They were just busy. I was so ready to read the apology. The sorry, Mom, traffic was insane. We're 20 minutes out. I picked up the phone and opened the group chat. There it was. A message from Randy and Irene. My eyes scanned the words, but my brain couldn't quite catch up. We think it's best if you take a step back for now. I just stared at it. I read it again. We think it's best if you take a step back for now. Take a step back. A step back from what? From the dining table? From Christmas? What did that mean? It was so cold, so corporate. It wasn't how a family talked. It felt like a slap. I was completely blindsided. All the air went out of my lungs. This wasn't an apology. It wasn't a delay. It was a rejection. A dismissal. They weren't coming. I sank back into the sofa cushions, the phone still glowing in my hand. I looked up at the dining room. The table was set so perfectly. The glasses were sparkling. I thought about the turkey, now probably dry, and the mashed potatoes, Randy's favorite, just sitting on the counter getting cold. All that work, all that hope. Take a step back. The words echoed in the silence. It was their way of saying, we don't want to do this anymore. We don't want to come. We don't want you. I tried to understand. I tried to find a reason. Had I been too pushy with my texts? Had I said something wrong the last time we spoke? But we barely spoke. My mind was just scrambling, trying to find something, anything to blame. But the truth, the one I'd been pushing away for a year, settled over me like a heavy, cold blanket. This wasn't a sudden decision. This wasn't about a text message I sent today. This had been building for years. The slow fade, the unanswered calls, the hectic schedules, the polite brush-offs. I had been ignoring the signs. I had been so desperate to hold on to the family that I refused to see the family that is. And now, here was the proof, in one short, brutal group message. They didn't even have the decency to call. They just sent a text, like they were canceling a dentist appointment, not their mother's Christmas. I felt abandoned. I felt like an idiot for spending weeks planning, for getting my hopes up, for believing that a perfect meal could fix a broken relationship. I wished I could have understood sooner. I wished I hadn't been sitting here for hours, waiting like a fool. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just felt numb. I sat there in the quiet house, with the smell of wasted food hanging in the air, just staring at that message. We think it's best if you take a step back for now. My family had changed, and they had just officially informed me that I was no longer a part of it. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour? Maybe 2? The sun started to set, and the house grew dark, but I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the twilight, in the quiet. Finally, I stood up. I walked into the dining room and just looked at the table. The food was cold. The beautiful dinner, a symbol of all my love and care, now just felt like a lonely, pathetic gesture. I picked up a fork and tried to take a bite of the mashed potatoes. I couldn't swallow. My throat just tightened. I put the fork down. I stared at the 2 empty seats, Jim's seat and the one I'd set for. Well, for both of them. I remembered how full this table used to be. How loud. Now, the silence was deafening. Just as I was about to start clearing the plates, my phone rang. My heart leaped. Maybe it was Randy calling to apologize, to explain the horrible misunderstanding. I looked at the screen. It was Irene. I answered, my voice a little shaky. Hello, Candace. Hi. Her voice was polite, distant, not warm, but not angry either. Just neutral. Irene, I said, I got your message. I figured, she said. There was a pause. I waited for her to explain, to say something, anything that would make sense. Listen, she finally said, and I could hear her exhale, like this was a task she just wanted to over with. Randy and I, we've got a lot going on, and we just need some space right now. We're prioritizing some other things. Other things? I asked, my voice small. On Christmas Day? It's complicated. Candace, we just think it's for the best. There it was again. That cold, corporate language. Best for who? Irene? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I hope you can understand, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. My heart just sank. There was no misunderstanding. This was it. The conversation was polite, but the message underneath was loud and clear. My relationship with my son, with his wife, it wasn't just strained. It was over. At least, the one I knew was. I had become an obligation, an afterthought, a box they had decided not to check this year. I see, I said. I didn't know what else to say. Okay, well, I hope you have a nice evening, she said. You too, Irene, I replied, and the line clicked dead. I spent the rest of my Christmas evening in solitude. I didn't cry. I was past that. I just felt empty. I covered the cold food with plastic wrap and put it in the refrigerator, one dish at a time. I blew out the candles, and I tried to make sense of how I had just become a stranger to my own son. The next few days were a blur. In an effort to feel anything, I started walking. I just put on my coat and walked through my neighborhood in Boulder. I walked past the park where I used to take Randy to play. I walked past the little cafe where Jim and I would get coffee every Saturday morning. I walked for hours, just letting the cold Colorado air sting my face. With every step, I started to think. I'd spent the last year, ever since Jim died, focused on what I had lost. And I'd spent the last 6 months desperately trying to hold on to Randy and Irene, trying to force a connection that just wasn't there anymore. I realized I'd been waiting for them to call, waiting for them to visit, waiting for them to need me. I'd made my entire life about them. And in the process, I had completely lost myself. This wasn't just about a ruined Christmas. It was about my life. I had to decide if I was going to spend the rest of it staring at an empty chair or if I was going to get up and live. A week later, I made a decision. I was done waiting. I was done being an afterthought. If Randy and Irene needed space, I was going to give it to them. And I was going to fill that space with my own life. It was hard at first. I was rusty at making new connections. But I started small. I found an old address book and called an old friend, Linda, who I hadn't spoken to in months. We met for coffee. It was nice. We laughed. I didn't even mention the Christmas drama. We just talked. Then I saw a flyer at the library for a local book club. I love to read. So I went. I was nervous, but the women there were kind. We talked about the book, and then we just talked about life. The next week, I started volunteering at the local senior center. Just a few hours, helping serve lunch. I met people there. People with their own stories, their own heartbreaks, and their own resilience. Slowly, without me even really noticing, I was building something new. I was building my own community, a community of people who wanted to be there, who asked me about my day, and actually listened to the answer. I was finding a new purpose. It wasn't the same as being a mom to a young son or a wife to a loving husband. It was different. It was mine. And I was starting to realize that I didn't need my children's approval or even their presence to feel whole. I was finding strength in my own independence. A year went by. Christmas came around again. This year, I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't spend days cooking a meal for people who wouldn't come. Instead, I decided to host a different kind of gathering. I invited Linda. I invited 2 ladies from my book club and a few of my favorite grumpy old men from the senior center. My house was full. It was loud. It was chaotic. The food wasn't perfect. We did it potluck style. But it was lively. It was filled with laughter and stories and genuine, messy, wonderful warmth. It wasn't the family I thought I'd have, but it was a family. A week later, a Christmas card showed up in my mailbox. It was from Randy and Irene. I opened it. There was no apology, no invitation, no long letter, just a generic card with a picture of a snowy landscape. Inside, a simple pre-printed message. Hope you're doing well. Merry Christmas. A year ago, that card would have broken me. It would have been more proof of the distance, of what I'd lost. But this year, I just looked at it. And I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad. I just felt okay. I placed the card in a drawer and went back to the living room. I sat in Jim's old chair, watching my new friends argue good-naturedly over a game of cards. This year, I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. I had already built my own table, and it was full. And it made me wonder, if you were in my shoes, would you continue waiting for people who don't show up? Or would you get busy building your own table with the people who truly care? Thank you for listening to my story. It's a story that's unfortunately all too common, and it's one we need to talk about. If you've ever felt this way, or if my story touched you, please let me know in the comments below. I read them all. And don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And of course, please subscribe to the channel for more real stories. You are not alone. Lastly, remember to download this wonderful book called Coming Back to Myself, 60 Liberating Truths to Find Yourself Again. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on her Kindle story.